Honestly, I still can't believe this happened. I'm a grown woman, a successful professional in my late 20s, and my own parents invited me to a fancy family dinner, only to tell me, with a straight face, that I was expected to sit at the kids' table. The kids' table. Was I wrong for what I did next? Tell me seriously, would you have tolerated that kind of blatant disrespect from the people who are supposed to love and support you the most? Because I sure as hell couldn't. And I want to know if you would have done the same thing. Let me take you back to where this all began, because to understand my reaction, you need to understand the history. My relationship with my parents, especially my mother, has always been complicated, to say the least. I've always felt like I was the black sheep, the one who never quite measured up to their impossibly high standards, or more accurately, the standards they set for my older sister Clara. Clara was always the golden child. She was beautiful, effortlessly charming, excelled in everything, and married young to a wealthy man from a good family. My parents absolutely adored her and doted on her every whim. I, on the other hand, was more independent, more rebellious in my youth, and focused on my career. I chose a demanding field in tech, one that required long hours and a thick skin, and while I've done incredibly well for myself, earning a substantial salary and living comfortably in my own city, it never seemed to press them as much as Clara's suburban life and two perfect children. My achievements were always met with a lukewarm, "That's nice, dear," while Clara's smallest accomplishments were celebrated with fanfare. I moved out for college and never really moved back, enjoying the freedom and the distance, but I always made an effort to visit for holidays and important family gatherings, hoping to bridge that unspoken gap between us. It was always an uphill battle though. Every conversation felt like an interrogation about my love life, or lack thereof by their standards, my career choices, or why I wasn't more like Clara. They'd often make passive-aggressive comments about my lifestyle, my fashion, or even my choice of car. It was exhausting, but I loved them, and I kept trying. I truly did. This particular dinner was supposed to be a big deal. My parents were celebrating their 30th wedding anniversary. They'd rented out a private dining room at a rather exclusive, upscale restaurant in their city, the kind of place with white tablecloths, hushed tones, and waiters who practically float. Everyone was invited: Clara, her husband Mark, and their two children, Lily, who is 9, and Tom, who is 7. My younger brother, David, was still in college, was also coming, along with a few aunts, uncles, and cousins. I received a formal, embossed invitation in the mail, which actually surprised me. Usually it's just a text message or a casual phone call. This felt different, more significant. I genuinely thought, for a fleeting moment, that maybe, just maybe, this was an olive branch. A sign that they finally saw me as an equal, as an adult daughter they were proud to have at their celebratory table. I was excited. I went out and bought a new dress, a beautiful emerald green silk number that cost more than I usually spend. But I wanted to my absolute best for this occasion. I even got my hair done. I wanted to make a good impression, to show them I was thriving, elegant, and worthy of a seat at the adults' table. The evening of the dinner arrived, and I drove the 2 hours to their city, feeling a mix of anticipation and nerves. I arrived at the restaurant a little early, wanting to greet my parents and perhaps help with any last-minute arrangements. They were already there, chatting with Clara and Mark. Clara, as always, looked impeccable, a vision in a pastel gown, her perfectly coiffed hair gleaming under the restaurant lights. Mark was beside her, looking equally polished. My parents greeted me with their usual reserved smiles. "Oh, you're here," my mother said, her eyes quickly scanning my new dress, a hint of something unreadable in her expression. "That's quite green." My father just grunted a hello. Already, the familiar chill started to creep in, but I pushed it down, determined to have a good night. The private dining room was beautifully decorated. There was a long, grand table in the center, set for what looked like 14 or 16 adults, gleaming with crystal and silverware. And then, tucked away in a corner, was a small, round table, adorned with a much simpler cloth and a few plastic cups. Lily and Tom were already sitting there, coloring in activity books. David, my brother, came over and hugged me warmly. He's always been my ally, the only one in the family who seems to truly get me. "You look great," he whispered, noticing my dress. "Don't let them get to you." I squeezed his hand, grateful for his quiet support. Guests started arriving, and the room began to fill with polite chatter and laughter. I mingled, catching up with my aunts and uncles, trying to maintain a cheerful facade. My parents were moving around, directing people to their seats. My mother, in particular, was in her element, orchestrating everything with a meticulous eye. I watched as she gestured for Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim to sit at the main table, then Cousin Sarah and her husband. Everyone was finding their place at the grand table, which was rapidly filling up. I noticed there was only one seat left, right between my father and Clara. I started to make my way towards it, assuming that was where I was meant to sit. I mean, it made sense, right? I'm their daughter. But as I approached, my mother intercepted me, her smile tight. "Oh honey," she said, her voice a little too sweet. "You'll be sitting over there." She gestured with a delicate hand towards the small, round table in the corner, the kids' table. My heart literally plummeted to my stomach. I felt the blood drain from my face. I thought I must have misheard her. The kids' table," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. My mother chuckled, a light, airy sound that grated on my nerves. "Yes, dear. Lily and Tom would love to have some company. And it leaves more room for the adults at the main table, doesn't it?" Clara, who was now seated at the main table, looked over with a patronizing smirk, her eyes glinting with amusement. Mark, her husband, just pretended to be engrossed in a conversation with my father. David, from across the room, caught my eye, his face a mask of concern and anger. He knew. He always knew what they were doing. I stood there, rooted to the spot, feeling a million eyes on me, though realistically, most people were too busy with their own conversations to notice this subtle act of cruelty. But it felt like a spotlight was shining on my humiliation. Me, the successful, independent woman, being relegated to the children's table as if I were still a teenager who needed supervision. It wasn't just about the table, it was about the message. It was a public declaration of my status in their eyes, not quite an adult, not quite worthy of the same respect as my sister, her husband, or even distant cousins. It was a childish power play, designed to put me in my place, to remind me that no matter what I achieved, I would always be secondary to Clara in their affections. So, that's the situation I was in, standing there, holding my new, expensive clutch, in my new, expensive dress, being told to sit with a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. And I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have sucked it up, swallowed your pride, and taken a seat with Lily and Tom? Or would you have reacted differently? Seriously, tell me. Because I need to know if I'm overreacting, or if my response was justified. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds, staring at my mother, who maintained her saccharine smile. The humiliation was a hot, burning flush on my face. All the years of feeling like the second best, the overlooked daughter, the one who wasn't quite good enough, coalesced into a sharp, painful sting. The emerald green dress suddenly felt like a costume, a desperate attempt to prove something to people who clearly didn't care. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. The years of trying, of hoping, of excusing their behavior, all vanished, replaced by a cold, righteous anger. I looked at the kids' table, at Lily and Tom, who were now looking up at me expectantly. They were innocent in this, of course, and I loved them, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't sit there. Not tonight, not ever again. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice, making sure it carried just enough to be heard by those closest to us, including my parents and Clara. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly calm despite the tremor in my hands. My mother's smile faltered. "Excuse me," she said, her tone suddenly sharper. I said no, I repeated louder this time, looking directly into her eyes. "I am not sitting at the kids' table." My father, who had been trying to ignore the situation, finally looked over, his brow furrowed. Clara just watched, a knowing smirk playing on her lips. "This is ridiculous." My mother huffed, regaining her composure. "Don't make a scene, just go sit down." "I won't be making a scene, Mother," I said, my gaze sweeping across the main table, where several family members were now openly watching us, sensing the tension. "You already did that when you invited your adult daughter to a formal dinner, and then expected her to sit with the children." My voice was still calm, but it held an edge of steel that I rarely, if ever, used with them. "I am not a child. I am a grown woman, with my own successful career, my own home, and my own life. I flew 2 hours to be here tonight. I bought a new dress for this occasion, and I came hoping to celebrate your anniversary with you, as an equal member of this family." I paused, letting my words sink in. "But it's clear I'm not seen as an equal. I'm seen as an afterthought, an inconvenience, someone to be shunted aside." My father started to say something, a placating, "Now, listen." But I cut him off, my eyes still fixed on my mother. "If there isn't a proper seat for me at the main table, as an adult, then there's clearly no seat for me here at all." I took another deep breath, the decision firm and unwavering in my mind. "So, I'm leaving." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face flushed crimson, a mix of shock and anger. Clara's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of genuine surprise. My father looked utterly bewildered. David, bless him, gave me a subtle nod of approval from across the room. I turned, deliberately slowly, and walked towards the entrance of the private dining room. As I reached the doorway, I stopped and looked back, meeting my mother's furious gaze one last time. Happy anniversary, my father, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I hope you enjoy your dinner. And then, I walked out. I walked past the startled maitre d', through the elegant restaurant, and out into the cool night air. I got into my car, my hands still shaking, but a strange sense of liberation washing over me. I drove away, the fancy restaurant and my loving family fading in my rearview mirror. I pulled over at a gas station a few miles down the road and just sat there for a moment, letting the adrenaline subside. Tears welled up, but they weren't tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of relief, of a long overdue release. I had finally stood up for myself. I had finally drawn a line. The aftermath, as you can imagine, was a whirlwind. My phone started ringing almost immediately. First, it was David, checking on me. He was supportive, angry on my behalf, and told me he understood completely. Then came the barrage of texts and calls from my mother. Her initial messages were furious, accusing me of ruining her anniversary, of being disrespectful, selfish, and dramatic. She called me an ingrate, said I was ungrateful for all they'd done for me. She even threatened to cut me off, though financially, she hasn't supported me in years. I ignored them all. I just couldn't engage. My father called a few hours later, his tone more subdued, asking me to come back, trying to smooth things over, saying it was just a misunderstanding. I told him calmly that it was no misunderstanding, that it was a deliberate insult, and that I was tired of being treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. I told him I needed space, and that until they could genuinely acknowledge how they made me feel, I wouldn't be returning to any family functions. Clara, surprisingly, sent me a single text. Wow. You actually did it. Good for you. I still don't know how to interpret that one, whether it was genuine approval or just her usual sarcasm, but I didn't respond. For a few weeks, the silence was deafening. It was painful, certainly. There's a part of you that always wants your parents' approval, no matter how old you get. But there was also a profound sense of peace. I wasn't constantly bracing myself for the next subtle jab, the next feeling of inadequacy. I focused on my work, on my friends, on myself. Eventually my mother sent a rather terse email, not quite an apology, but acknowledging that perhaps we could have handled the seating arrangement differently. It wasn't the full reckoning I had hoped for, but it was something. My father called again, this time expressing genuine regret that I had felt hurt. He admitted they hadn't considered my feelings, and that he understood why I reacted the way I did. He even said he was proud of my independence, which was a first. It's still a work in progress, and the relationship is fragile, but I feel like for the first time, I've set a boundary that they finally, grudgingly, respect. I haven't been back to a big family dinner since, but I've had a few individual coffee dates with my father, and even a slightly awkward but civil phone call with my mother. I think they're realizing that if they want me in their lives, they need to treat me with the respect I deserve as an adult. It's a hard lesson for them, and for me, but it's one I needed to teach. I often wonder if things would have been different, if I had just sat down that night. Would they have ever truly seen me then? I honestly don't think so. Sometimes, you have to stand up for yourself, even against the people you love, to finally gain the respect you've been craving. This whole experience taught me a lot about self-worth and the importance of setting boundaries, even with family. It was incredibly painful, but also incredibly freeing. So, if you've ever felt overlooked or disrespected by your own family, know that you're not alone, and it's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to demand to be treated with dignity. Like this video if you were on my side and understood why I walked out. Subscribe for more stories like this, where I share real-life dilemmas and the tough choices people have to make. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I do the right thing? What would you have done? I'll see you all in the next story.